What's up, everybody? So I'm back from vacation. I'm back from my staycation. I was hanging out here at the house, getting some extra rest because I got a lot going forward, and I needed to get my whole life together so that I could, stay fresh and get out here and do the things that we need to do. So I want to welcome everybody on in. Thank you, peace and blessings, sis. Hey, 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 hey. Um, So I want to invite everybody just to like and share out this video real quick. We're going to talk about a little bit about Nipsey Hussle. Everybody's talking about him today. So let me just jump on that gravy train and talk about him because I want to talk from what I hope to be a little bit of a different perspective. Um, there's some things that I've heard that were kind of disparaging, and not a lot. Most of everything that I've seen and heard has been, pretty on the up and up. So I appreciate that. I appreciate us being able to see the value and honoring somebody who was trying to do something positive. I've seen some people, get in here and talk a little bit about some of the negative things that are in Nipsey's past, talking about his gangbanging days and things of that sort. And I think it's important for us to recognize the things that happen in our community that lead to that, right? So gangs didn't pop up from nowhere. They are a symptom of things that have happened in our communities, and not just the mental conditioning that's happened in our communities, but gangs and gang life are a symptom of the systemic oppression that we've seen and have experienced in our communities for a long time. So I think it's important for us to just, one, recognize what that looks like and recognize that that is a thing that has happened. And then I think we have to, go a step or two further and and talk a little bit about what we uh, what we see when somebody makes a change, right? And so we have to acknowledge that people are able to make changes, and that that's a part of growth. That's a part of learning and understanding and coming to a better place and understanding in your life and what that looks like. What's up, Mia? I joined that live for a few minutes. I caught it towards the end. I caught it towards the end. I homeschool my baby, so in the morning we're over here working, and so yeah, so I caught a piece of that towards the end. But I wanted to just quickly kind of go through some of the things. So on that note of talking about changing narratives, I want to talk about some of the things that Nipsey changed and talked about. And I don't want to get into a lot of whether or not his death was around white supremacy or whether it was a conspiracy or whatever. If you follow me on Facebook, you can follow me at Jice Johnson, not the page. I don't have a Jice Johnson page. I'm just a person on Facebook. So that page is because Instagram made me create that, and I don't know how to get it to come off. But if you follow me on Jice Johnson, I put out there briefly, what my thoughts were. I felt like it was very Pacish, very Tupac-ish. But I didn't really get into a whole lot of, whatever is going on with the conspiracy about why he was killed, about, whether or not this is about Dr. CB. A lot of people think that that everybody knows who he is. Everybody does not know who he is. So if you're a person who's into health and wellness, if you're a person who has looked up information about how to heal your body, you possibly would come across him. If you're a person who has looked into Black empowerment and things of that sort, you most likely would have come across him, right? But I think sometimes we have to recognize that there are 44 million Black people in this country. And when we say a lot of people or everybody, all 44 million of us do not know who he is. So, some conspiracies floating around about whether or not he was killed because of him making a documentary. I don't think the documentary about Dr. CB would be something that he would be killed. That's my personal opinion. But, just putting it out there that's not what I personally don't feel that way, right? So but I do feel like it was very Pacish because his notoriety has been coming up, and it's rare to find someone who can bridge the gap between the street life and begin to push out a certain narrative inside of our communities where that narrative is not heard. Running up and down Crenshaw, running up and down those streets in LA, they're not talking about Dr. CB, right? So So let's just recognize that, right? So to find someone who can begin to bridge those gaps, that is a rarity. And I do believe those messages are out there to be silenced. And so the government has made it very clear to us that they are about not about Black unity. They believe Black unity to be a threat to this country. That's been out there for decades. That is a fact, right? So that's not opinion, that's a fact. So I think it's really important just for us to recognize some of those things when we talk about whatever those conspiracies are. But that's not really what I want to focus on, because what I feel like is that we've lost a great asset to our community. And I know there's going to be a lot more details that come out, but I want to talk a little bit about why I feel like that we lost a great asset, right? So let's talk a little bit about the changing narrative that Nipsey was bringing to the table. First of all, Nipsey was talking about what does it mean to be cool. He said we need to change what it means to be cool. And I was glad to hear it from somebody besides me, right? Because I don't have an influence on hip hop culture, and I don't have a major influence on our culture as we see it, right? But it's important for those messages to come out. He's certainly not the only one. I think Jay-Z has talked about that. I think David Banner has talked about that. You got Killer Mike now talking about that, and a whole lot more, right? T.I. is talking a lot about that. And I know I'm going to forget some, so I'm not going to try and name them all. But I think it's important for us to change the narrative of what it means to be cool. And so we think about red bottoms and Gucci bags and, and the fast cars and, the lavish houses. And to come across someone who says, hey, let's change the narrative on what it looks like to be cool. If you got the red bottoms and the Gucci bags and you don't own any real estate, you're not cool, my nigga. You're not doing it. You're not doing big things, right? So this is what Nipsey started talking about. Let's change the narrative of what it means to be cool. He also started talking about mentorship. He talked about the fact that we used to have, the older people in the community giving game to the younger people in the community, and how that's not happening anymore. And we don't see so much of that, right? And so at this point, I don't know if it should be passed down from the older generation to the younger generation. I think there's value there, but also considering that our older generation is a generation that is in between the civil rights generation and kind of what we have now. And that generation is one who did not grow up with a lot of leaders and did not grow up with a healthy sense of Black empowerment and a healthy sense of self. So I'm not going to say that we should not pay attention to our elders. We definitely have elders who we should be listening to. But I also think it's important for people who have success to pass on that knowledge and that information and pass along what it means to be successful. So you have that aspect, right? So he spoke to mentorship. I think that's important to hear that from somebody of his influence. He also talks about accountability. He talked about what it means to say that if you're wrong, you're wrong, to say if you messed up, you messed up. And so I think that's really important, because he spoke to, if you go back and listen to not just his music, but if you go back and listen to his interviews and things of that sort, he talks about what that means to come in to that level of accountability and say, hey, if I didn't get this right, let me go back and be accountable to that, and let me, fix that and change that, right? And that how we often have to step outside of our own ego. And that's a huge problem in the Black community. You see that on a small level, right? So currently I live in Denver. If y'all know me or follow me, I am from Oakland, California. So I don't claim Denver as where I'm from. This is just where I currently call home. And that's something that I see often in this small community here, is that you have this small community and people, not that people aren't doing big things, not that people aren't doing things that are great, but you have this small community. And what I see happen often out here is you have people who think that they're, super big, because here in small ass Denver, their name is known. And because they think they're doing big things, their ego gets in the way so much, right? And I know that this is not just a Denver problem. I know this happens in communities all across our country, right? I'm highlighting Denver because I live here in Denver. But here in Denver, I see it happen where people think that they're doing big things. And because of that, they allow their ego to get in the way of collaboration. They allow their ego to get in the way of forward movement. And so instead, we take a step forward, we take 2 or 3 back, because that ego problem is a big deal. Like, we really got to check our egos, right? So I think that accountability piece is a message that really needs to get out there, and needs to get out there more. He talked a lot about cultural currency. He even talked about how he learned about cultural currency and just understanding the power of your influence, which is something that Gary Vaynerchuk talks a lot about. It's something that quite a few people talk about, but isn't often talked about as much in the Black community. So I think that's important for us to have that conversation within our own community. Right. So, and then one of the other things that I think he talked about with changing the narrative is he talks about our ecosystem. And that is a big thing. So let me break that down because, again, y'all, I'm a teacher, and I think it's important for us to recognize that everybody doesn't always understand what these terms mean. And sometimes we just say some stuff and then you can't follow. And I don't want you to not follow. Like, we got to be able to, my bad. Thought that was on Do Not Disturb. We got to be able to, recognize that everybody does not always have the same understanding of terminology, right? And so ultimately, when he's talking about ecosystem, he's talking about how we have to be able to control what it means from the production all the way to the consumption. And quite often, our community is on the consuming end, meaning we're on the retail end, meaning we are the buyers, but we're not the people who are manufacturing it. We don't own the supply chain. We don't own the distribution channels. We don't own that entire process, right? And so if you want to think about what it takes before you, the end user, gets a hold of something, what does it take for me to get a hold of this pen? So if I buy the pen, I'm on the consumer side of the pen. But this pen is made up of a bunch of different things, right? There's rubber on the end. There's the different pieces that go. There's the metal. There's the actual pen piece and the ink, right? So there's a lot of different pieces that go into creating the pen. And so those are all the pieces on the manufacturing side and the supply side. All those pieces got to get put together, right? So that's the manufacturing side. And then the pen actually has to get out. How does the pen get to me before I buy it? What he's talking about with creating ecosystems is he's saying we got to own the entire system, right? So it's good to hear somebody, again, I'm just giving this man props. It's good to hear somebody talking about owning the entire ecosystem. And this is what he was looking at doing when he put together, he's very much known for underground music or non-mainstream music because he refused to just go and sign with anybody. He was going to own the process. So I think it's important because not often most often, I should say, we do not own that entire process. And so to hear somebody talk about this inside of our community, it was good to hear. And so those are some of the ways that I feel like we have lost an asset to our community, with someone who was speaking the language of the streets, but was also speaking the language of business, and then speaking the language of doing good business. And so if you're not super familiar with Nipsey, or you really don't know, he started to become real popular. I was not a big fan of, earlier in his music career or anything like that. So as he began to become more mainstream, they began to do articles on him and interviews with him and things like that. That's how I got to know who he was. And that's how I started really tuning in and dialing into what this man was saying. So, some of the other things that I think are really important, and I want to start breaking some of these things down, is the fact that we talk about, one of the things that he did. Well, let me back up. Let me actually talk a little bit about some of his business ventures, right? Because again, they're talking a lot about how he was killed, and they're highlighting that he was a businessman, but let's break down some of his business ventures. And so before I do that, again, I just want to welcome everybody on in. Thank you for watching. Please share this out. Please like the video. Please hit the subscribe button. And that bell if you want to get notifications when I come on. But I want to talk real quick about some of the things that he was doing. So first of all, outside of his music, the second thing I think he's probably most known for is his clothing brand, right? So he had the Crenshaw, but really he had a bigger clothing brand, which was Marathon. And what he wanted to do with Marathon was turn that into a chain, or turn that into a franchise. So we talk a lot about boycotting, these big name brands like Gucci and things like that. When, again, understanding cultural currency, we're half the reason why these name brands have the exposure that they have, right? Gucci doesn't do a lot of advertising. You know who does advertisement for Gucci? All of our rappers, when they put it on and they do their music videos, right? And so Gucci will go and lend them clothing to wear inside of their videos. They go and they promote all of this, and Gucci then did all their marketing for them right there. So it's important for us to recognize like some of the biggest brands that we covet don't really do a lot of the marketing and advertising. Our cultural currency does that for them. And so while we're talking about boycotting some of these other brands, what we should be forget talking about where we're boycotting. We need to be promoting some of the brands that we already have within our own community. There are a ton of great brands that we already have in our own community. So one of them that he had was Marathon, right? Then he went and bought a plaza. So they talk about Marathon, they talk about him having this store, but really what he did was he went and bought a plaza. Now, let's be clear. He didn't go and buy the plaza on his own. He went and bought the plaza with a partner, with a few partners, but predominantly with one partner. And they were talking about basically building housing and a series of chain stores and things like that. And most importantly, they were going to do this inside of what's called an opportunity zone. So I'm going to get down a little bit more into this because I'm about to start breaking some of this down. But he wanted to open up, or they bought already this plaza. It is inside of an opportunity zone. And then what they were going to do with that opportunity zone, along with some other investors, were create housing and create some chain stores, right? And then as a part of that, understanding the importance of the opportunity zone and understanding what the opportunity zone could bring to us as a community, then they went out and they found some other investors. So they were creating an opportunity zone fund, which was to help other investors and help be able to secure real estate and opportunities inside of these opportunity zones. Okay. So I want to get into, I talked a little bit about where he was changing the narrative, but let's start breaking some of these things down. So first of all, if you understand Nipsey Hussle, or if you know who he is, or if you really were following him outside of his music, one of the things that he talks about is he built slow versus fast, right? So he was about slow money versus fast money. This is an issue of patience. This means that he was not talking about popping something in the microwave. This nigga was cutting on the stove and he was about to slow simmer some things until it really became what it needed to be. So let me break down that cooking analogy. If you know cooking, you can pop something in the microwave and you'll have it quick. But if you really want to bring out the aroma, you really want to bring out the flavor, you really want to have something that tastes better and is better for you, you're going to cook that on the stove, right? You're going to cook that through the oven. You're going to cook that on the stove top. You're going to take a little bit more time with that because it's going to last longer. It's going to be better. He was talking about building slow versus building fast, right? He waited for the right terms. He talks about this inside of his interviews. Nipsey Hussle maintained his own masters, maintained his own production. He held onto his own product because it was important for him before he signed with a major label. It was important for him to get the right terms. So he had to build and build and build on his own until he could get the right terms, which means that there was a label that decided that he was worth having on their brand and was willing to negotiate those terms with him. So often we believe that we only have one opportunity. And so you see people jump at these opportunities and they're not the right opportunity. He did not sign with the first label that came to him. He did not sign with the second or the third. He was a highly sought after artist for these labels and he did not sign immediately. He took years and years before he signed. So what was he doing in between all that time? He was still building. He was selling his own brand. He was doing his own thing. He was maintaining his own rights. He did not just jump. And that's because we believe in this scarcity mindset that we're willing to go and jump at something that even when it's not the right opportunity. Why do we feel like we will only have one shot or one opportunity? That's not accurate. If you are doing the hard work and you look at an opportunity and you determine that that opportunity is not the right opportunity for you at the time, you feel like it's not the right terms, you feel like they are not giving you what you're worth, why would you go ahead and cut that deal anyway? Why would you cut that deal anyway? Because then what happens is you start to get resentful because you feel like you're not making the money that you want to make. You feel like you're not being valued. You feel all of these things because you cut a deal instead of waiting for the right terms, instead of waiting for the right opportunities to come along. And part of that is built into our current culture because everything is so quick, quick, quick. We have to have it now. We do not have to have it right now. It is okay to wait for the right time. So I think that's a huge lesson that he taught in practicality. He did not say that. He lived that out. And you can see that because he started building popularity years ago and stayed not and looked for deals. It wasn't that he didn't entertain conversations with record labels. He entertained them and said, it's not the right one for me. Okay. The second thing that he talked about was following a blueprint. So I think this is super, super, super important. He talked about following a blueprint. He talks about saving and stacking his money, right? This man did not just come out of pocket and finance his way. Like he didn't credit card and roll his way into debt. Now, I think there's a conversation about good debt versus bad debt. That's not a part of this conversation. What I'm getting at here is that he had to save and he had to stack. So while everybody else is rolling out and every single time you get a little bit of money in, you rushing to go spend that out. You get a raise at work, you spending more money. You go and get a tax refund, you spending all of that money. You come across, a small inheritance, you out there spending all of that money instead of saving and stacking that money. There's a blueprint to success. It already lives. It's already out there. So he knows that in order for him to go and get an asset, he knows in order for him to be able to finance his own production of his own record, he has to have money. So many of these young guys, they want to get out here and they want to do, big things, even in the music industry or whatever. But when it comes time to building out their mixtape, they don't have money for studio time. They don't have money for equipment. They don't have money to produce their own CDs. They don't have money for the artwork. They don't have money for any of their stuff. Because every time you get a dime, you spend in a dime. Matter of fact, every time you get a dime, you're trying to figure out how to spend 15 cents. So there's this process to which we have to understand there's already a blueprint in place. Saving, stacking your money. He talked about having life insurance, which means that we don't have to have a GoFundMe because he died. He had a wife and kids. So in addition to his assets, he already has something in place for them. That's important. But so many of us talk about not being able to afford life insurance. I know I used to sell life insurance. And the only people who ever told me that they couldn't afford life insurance are Black folks who would not cut off their cable, but they don't want to have life insurance. So you got a cable bill, but you don't have life insurance. You got insurance on your cell phone, but you don't have life insurance. You insured your car, but you don't have life insurance. So then when something happens, you GoFundMe. You GoFundMe, right? So he don't have to do that. He talked about life insurance. He talked about having investments. Investments is part of the blueprint. So again, when you follow people who are successful, they're going to talk about the things that they invested in. And I'm talking about investments in one quick second, but I just want to point this out. But he had investments. He also has partnership. So he didn't do it by themselves. I don't know why or where we get this idea that it is glorified to do it on your own. It's all me. He didn't buy the plaza by himself. He bought the plaza with investment, with a partner. He bought the plaza with a partner. And then also he talked about networking. Here's an interesting piece is how he met his partner. How he met the partner who was building the Opportunity Zone Fund with him, and how he met the partner who was building the plaza with him. He met him at a basketball game. They had a conversation. They had some drinks. Now they're having a whole conversation, and that means that after he left there, he saw value in that person, so he had to continue to follow up with that person. It's called networking. So we hear this idea about your net worth is inside of your network, and yet most of us don't have a true network. We don't have a network. So I think it's important for us to recognize some of the things that he did right. There's a blueprint. If not just him, if you go and look at anybody successful, they're going to talk about the network that they built. And the network doesn't always have to be these super successful people. You can build, super famous people. You can build networks all around you with people who are doing good things and doing positive things. Then we have to be informed. He talked about opportunity zones. If you don't know what an opportunity zone is, you're not informed. You're not informed. So he talked about having an opportunity zone. And the last thing that I want to talk about that he talked about before I start talking, the last thing he talked about that I want to talk about before I talk about what we need to be doing and some of the key takeaways that I think, we can get from his legacy in his life is he talked about grit. He didn't use the word grit, but that's what he talked about. So if you go back and listen to some of his interviews, one of the things that stuck out to me about an interview that he had a while ago, but I won't forget it because this is when I started paying attention to grit. He started talking about faith and discipline. If you look up grit, they're going to talk about passion and perseverance, right? But isn't that somewhere along the same line? You get passionate about the things that you have faith in. If you believe that you have a purpose, right? You have something that you're passionate in, you're going to begin to build faith inside of your ability to do that thing. And then he talked about discipline, which is where perseverance comes into play. And so he didn't call it grit, but that's what I call it. I believe that's what it is. He talked about faith and he talked about discipline. You got to have faith that keeps you going through those dark times, but every day you got to get up and you got to exercise discipline in order to move that dream forward. And so I just did like a little short thing out on my Instagram where I said, faith without works is dead. So how inept it is, that I was reminded about his conversation about grit, because faith without works is dead. He's talking about faith and discipline. You can't just believe in something if you're not willing to put in the work. But in order for you to put in the work, you have to be disciplined in order for you to keep doing that on a day in, day out type of situation. That's faith and discipline. That essentially he's talking about grit. He's saying that you got to stick to it long enough for it to pay off, which means you have to be disciplined in what you do on a day-to-day basis in order for that to happen. And so I want to talk about that investment piece, and then I'm going to talk about 5 things that we need to do, or 5 takeaways that I take away and that I want to, give out to you to take away is we have to stop worrying about losing. So that's one thing about investments. I hear that all the time. People ask me about, what about the Uber and the Lyft investment? What about this investment? There are a ton of opportunities that we have. You have the Tulsa Real Estate Fund going on. You got Derek Grace out here trying to pull money together for some investments. You have, I'm about to be putting out an investment soon of some investment opportunities that I'm working on out in Detroit. You have the store in Atlanta, right? So We Buy Black was promoting out this store that they're trying to build in Atlanta. They want to do an all-Black grocery store. And the thing that I hear about investment that becomes so fucking discouraging, y'all, is the fact that we are afraid to lose some money. You waste money all the time. You buy shit that doesn't matter. First of all, you buy fast food. That's just killing your body. Okay. But then you buy things like, you want to buy Gucci. As soon as you bought it, it lost value. It doesn't grow in value. You buy a brand new car, you lose value in that car. Very few cars gain in value. They lose. You're not buying any car that's gaining. You're losing value as soon as you drive it off the lot. Well, before you drive it, as soon as you sign the paper, the car has lost value. You'll never sell it for what you bought it for, ever. So we're constantly talking about how we don't want to invest in something because we're afraid that we lose, and we lose all the time. We lose daily. Our assets are depreciating. Our net worth as a community, as a socioeconomic group, the 44 million Black people are having less and less and less wealth year over year over year, to the point where we're this close from losing it and being at zero net worth. We don't have wealth. And so you're worried about taking a chance on investing in something that could be bigger, but you don't want to invest, but you don't want to think about how you're buying something that's worthless or that's losing value. I invested in Tulsa Real Estate Fund. I invested in the grocery store. I'm telling you about things I've invested myself in. If I lose the money that I put there, I'm not going to be mad because I gave it a chance. And we are most critical of our own people when it comes to investing. You would first invest in somebody who ultimately is not about your best interest, or you invest in systems that ultimately oppress you, but you don't want to invest in your own people so that we can continue to build. It is the most discouraging shit that I've ever seen. This one thing that discourages me on a regular basis. I literally have to meditate and keep my mind focused so that I don't get discouraged by how little we're willing to invest in themselves. I get hit up on a regular basis of people who want me to give everything that I spend time learning and cultivating. They want me to give it to them for free. Because if I charge you for a class, I'm being accused of taking advantage of the Black community because I charge you for a class. Forget the fact that I have to study, put together the class, put together the PowerPoint and the materials that I'm giving to you, pay for the technology in order to do that, pay for the internet, pay for the webcam, pay for the laptop, pay for the programs to put it all together, unless you thought Microsoft was free. Just in case you don't know, the PowerPoint is not free. It's not free. So, but then I get accused of taking advantage to charge somebody $15, $25 for my biggest ticket. My biggest ticket is like $100 for a full day conference that includes breakfast, lunch, and snacks. And so those are the types of things that we come around, right? That is my biggest level of discouragement. We have to stop worrying about losing. I don't care if I want the Tulsa Real Estate Fund to succeed? Absolutely. Will I cry if I lose the money I invested in it? I will not. Money is a replenishable thing. Money is replenishable. My time is not. And the time that we had to invest to make an impact before we leave this earth, and the time that we had to invest and make an impact for our future generations, that is limited. My ability to make money is not. So we have to really begin to understand that we spend time worrying about the wrong things. We should be more concerned about our time than we are about our money. Meaning we can get more money. So I don't mean don't be concerned about your money. Don't mistake my words. Be concerned about your money, but also be concerned about your time. And then think about where you're placing your money. Because if you're placing your money into something that is just going to go out, then that's where you have a problem. Nipsey Hussle said all money in. So you got to put your money into something that you believe can regurgitate and reproduce and recreate that additional money going forward. So I'm going to take one more minute here to ask you to follow, subscribe, and share. And then I'm going to talk about these 5 things, right? So please, if you're here, I appreciate you. Please subscribe, please share. Follow me. You can follow me at Jice Johnson on Facebook, not the page, but the personal. I don't have a Facebook page. You can follow me at Jice Johnson on Instagram. You can also follow Facebook and Instagram at BBI Professional. All right. So I want to thank all of you for being here. And then I want to talk about these 5 things and then I'm going to get off. All right. So the 5 lessons that I learned from Nipsey Hussle and the 5 lessons that I really want to push out there and that I hope that we take from this. We could talk about the violence in our community. We could talk about gangs. We could talk about conspiracies. We could talk about, what he may or may not be doing. All of those things are really important conversations for us to have. That's not the conversation I want to have today. That's not the conversation I want to have. As I think about the asset that we lost, I want to talk about what he brought to the community. So the first thing is that we have to shift our narrative. And in his words, he said, we have to stop making dumb shit cool. Okay. Those are his words. Those are Nipsey Hussle's words. Stop making dumb shit cool. And so we have to begin to shift our narrative as to what we value and what we find is cool inside of our community. So that's number 1. The second thing is we need to own our ecosystem. So Dr. Amos Wilson talked about this. He said, you can't consume your way to equality. We have to produce. We have to produce. So we have to own the ecosystem from the beginning to the end. From the beginning to the end. We have to own the manufacturing. We have to own the supply chain. We have to own the distribution channels. We have to own the retail stores. Then we can consume. That's how we cycle our dollar inside of our community. When you look at the Asian community, and I don't like to romanticize any community, but I'm going to point out when you look at the Asian community, just as an example, how do they have the hair industry on lock, right? Not only are they producing, they produce the hair ties, they produce the bobby pins, right? They produce the clips, they produce the wigs, they produce the weaves, they produce a whole lot of stuff. Then they own the supply, they own that whole, all of that, right? Then they own the distribution channels. They're also distributing it. This is why we have a hard time breaking in, because they're the distributors, which means that they can sell or not sell to you on the retail end. So even if you open up the beauty supply store, where are you getting all the inventory for your store? If we don't own where the inventory is coming from, if we don't own the distribution channels for the inventory, that's where we have our biggest hang up. Because if you just open the store, you're on the other end and you don't own nothing in between here. They control what you do inside of your store. But then we also have to own the stores, which is why the beauty supply stores are also owned by the Asians. So they own all of that entire ecosystem, and all we do is come in and buy. We're the consumer. We got to own the whole ecosystem. He talks about that. If you listen to how he got around with his records, he owned the whole system, right? So we have to own the ecosystem. We cannot consume our way into equality. We have to produce. Production to consumption. Number 3, success leaves clues. This man was smart. He didn't just go out and do things on his own and say, let me figure it out. He learned from people. He had a plan with his money. He saved, he invested, he partnered, he networked. And then he also talked about certain traits that you have to have. Again, success leaves clues. People who are successful by and large have a lot of the same traits. They're disciplined. They have grit. They're lifelong learners. He talks about when he didn't know what cultural currency was, and then he went and learned about that. Just as one example. So you have to go out and continuously learn for your entire lifetime, right? He talked about a book that was given to him, how he read that book, and then he embodied what he learned. And then he went and acted that out. I hear people talking all the time. Some of the least successful people who struggle all the time be talking about what book they read. But are you implementing what you read? Knowledge without implementation is nothing. It's powerless. You take that shit to your grave. You leave nothing behind. You leave no legacy. You leave no pathway. So you have to understand that once you learn something, then you have to apply what you learned. Then we have to be informed. So I just said we have to shift the narrative, own the ecosystem. We have to look at what clues success leaves, right? Success leaves clues. And then we have to be informed. So that ties in with being a lifelong learner. As an example, he understood that not only was it important, like he didn't just go and buy this plaza because it played a role in his life. They bought the plaza because it made an economically sound decision because it's in an opportunity zone, which means he had to learn about the benefits of building inside of an opportunity zone. So you have to be informed about what's going on. There are things and opportunities that are taking place all around. Opportunity zones is a nationwide situation that's going on. They're here in Denver, they're in Detroit, they're in Atlanta, they're in Houston, they're in Chicago, they're in Philly, they're in Baltimore, they're in DC, they're in the Bay Area, they're everywhere. Go and find out what an opportunity zone is, but also go and look for other things. I hear veterans come up to me and ask me all the time, there are programs in place for veterans. There are programs in place for women. I hate the term minority, but if you're going to be on this chessboard, understand the term and then know that there are opportunities that exist out there for minorities. There are not as many opportunities as we should have, but they are there and we don't take advantage of them. The ones that are already there. So then when we go and ask to leverage for more, when we go and try to create policy leveraging for more, the reason why a lot of times there are deaf ears turned to that is because we're not already taking advantage of what's there in place. If you're a business and you don't go out and get women-owned certified, minority-owned certified, veteran certified, if you're not going to go get these things that are already in existence, why would they give you more? And not that we should be asking for handouts. So again, I like to be careful about what I say. We're not asking for handouts. We're asking for what's ours. We're saying we want more of it. We're saying we need more of it, and we do, but we don't already take advantage of what is currently in existence. So let's acknowledge that. So we have to be informed. And then the last thing is we have to unite. And I think that's something that he's I'm not going to say that that was a strong message that he talked about, but he talked about Black empowerment. He talked about what he was doing inside of his own hood with his own family, right? But we have to be united. We really have to be united. We have to understand that the success of one person is not the success of the collective. So what bothers me, one of the things that boils my blood is when I hear people talk about what one person did. Well, if Oprah could do it, if Michael Jordan could do it, if LeBron can do it, if so-and-so down the street who was from my block can do it, and that's bullshit. Let me just stay straight up. That is not accurate. The statistics is what you should be looking at. Statistically speaking, even when you include all of the Tyler Perrys and the Oprahs and the LeBrons and the all of them, Black people as a whole are headed to zero wealth. We have no wealth. So stop looking at the individual and then making that the case for the collective. I talk about this in the education system because I think this is very important for us to understand. I had even a discussion with my sister because my sister is a teacher, and my sister looks at her community and who made it out with her and her group of people, right? My sister is a linguistic learner like me. I'm not a linguistic learner. I'm sorry. I am a linguistic learner. School was easy for me. School was easy for me because of the way that I learn. But my brother is a kinesthetic and a visual learner. My brother is an artist. School was not easy for him initially. My school did not become easier for my brother until well into his adult years when he learned the art of how to learn. But school was not easy for him. What point am I making? We cannot say that because I made it out. So who gives a shit if I survive the school system? If my children can't survive the school system? Because statistically speaking, they are not linguistic learners, or at least my daughter is, and my two youngest, I don't know, they're too little for me to tell. But you cannot base the entire success of a group based off of one small section. The amount of linguistic learners that we have is this small. So all the rest of the type of learners look like they're unsuccessful. We say they're unsuccessful because we don't tailor the system towards them. So it's the same thing. You cannot look at the success of one and then try and apply that to the collective. As a collective, we are not showing our success. We are not successful. So we have to unite in order to put in place policy and legislation and systems that uplift all of us, that uplift the majority. We would see a huge shift in schools if we changed the way that schools did learning. If we shifted learning from linguistic learning to kinesthetic learning, we would see a huge shift in learning outcomes. One of the biggest things I used to say it myself, and so again, a part of the learning process, right? I used to say, if you hide it in a book, you can, if you don't want Black folks to know, hide it in a book, right? I will never say that shit again, because now that I understand the learning process as a linguistic learner, books call to me. But if you're a kinesthetic learner, you might have a harder time reading books and gaining that knowledge. Maybe audiobooks is better for you because you can go for a jog, go for a run, hit the gym, and listen to a book and get more out of it than you would if you opened up a book and read it. So I would never say that ever again. And I think that we have to understand how those things are disempowering to us as a community to say, if we hide it in a book, then you're hiding it from Black folks because we don't value education. There's a reason why we value entertainment. It frustrates me because that's not how I learn. So I'm not saying that I don't get frustrated, but we have to understand that we learn differently and that we learn in a way that isn't always going to be from hearing a lecture or that we learn from reading a book, right? So where am I going with this with the unity? My point is that we have to not be looking at the individual. Stop thinking about what works for you individually and think about what works for us as a collective. If we don't unite, we will die. If we don't unite, we will die. That is what will happen. We will have no wealth. We will have no leverage. We will have no political clout. And it won't matter the 1 or 2 or 20 people that we can point to say, look at them, because as a collective, we won't get there. Me being successful does not guarantee the success of my children. So until we change the system and build a system that gives the majority of us a fighting chance, then we will continue to see our communities and our families and our children be unsuccessful. The reason why white people can point to individuals is because they live inside of a system which by and large gives them a fighting chance. So they have the ability to say if they are successful or not successful, it is because of their own work ethic. It is because of what they did or didn't do, their own ability to be disciplined or not disciplined. Black people cannot say the same thing. If you are a Black person that made it out and became successful, matter of fact, statistics say your children are just as likely as someone whose children are, as someone who's unsuccessful, for your children to end up in the same situations, end up in jail, end up with no money. All of those things are there. So we have to unite in order to create the systems that matter to us, in order to leverage our political clout, in order to pool our dollars together to buy. So we can't just keep talking about buy the block, but you ain't willing to unite with anybody because you don't have it by yourself to buy the block. You got to pull in some investors, some partners. You're going to have to build with your network. You're going to have to look to your left, look to your right. You're going to have to pull in those folks and work with them. You're going to have to pull in your cousins and your auntie and your uncle and your mama. You're going to have to work together. So those are the things that I got from his life that I wanted to push out there. We have to shift the narrative. We have to own the ecosystem. We have to recognize that success leaves clues and follow those clues. We have to be informed and we have to unite. I'm saddened that we lost such an asset. I think this man has such good messages to put out there. And I hate that some people can only look at him as being a thug or in a gang. And as I said, I know more things are going to come out about how he died and what all that looked like. So not to say that there aren't more conversations to come, but I wanted to honor him by talking about some of the lessons that he has given the community, whether we know it or we didn't know it. And I wanted to put those out there in the aftermath of all of this. And so whether or not it was a conspiracy, whether or not it was just gang violence, whether or not it was something that came from his past, or, something that, or something that was more recent, I want to put that out there. So you said the family be tripping. Sometimes family is tripping, but you know what? That's a whole nother conversation, because we still have to work within the bounds of creating agreements. And so I think it's still important, even when you're working with friends, even when you're working with family, that you create agreements and that you put those agreements to paper and that we hold each other accountable. But that's a whole nother conversation. But I appreciate everybody who stayed tuned in. So again, I would love if you would follow me, follow me on Jice at Jice Johnson or at BBI Professional. Please subscribe. Please share out this message. And then also, you guys, if you want to get some more information from me on more of a one-on-one basis, you can go to Patreon at Grind with Jice. I'll drop that in there, Patreon at Grind with Jice. And then also, my last thing is, don't forget about the Black Agenda. So the Black Agenda on Tour is coming up with myself, Michi X, Dave Banner, Derek Martin, and we'll have some others. We're coming to 7 different cities. We're going to Detroit, we're going to Chicago, DC, Brooklyn, Houston, Atlanta, and my hometown, Oakland. So make sure that you go to the blackagendaontour.com and you can find out more information there. Tickets are on sale now, so you can go and get that. What we're going to be talking about in the Black Agenda, we're talking about the ways that we're under attack in this country, and we're also talking about the ways that we can fight back. We're talking about not only the ways that we can fight back collectively, but also what we can do on an individual basis with the resources that are within our own community. This tour is more than just us talking. We are all about action. So there are some other things to get involved with there. One, if you are interested in sponsoring, you can also go on there and find out more about that, or you can contact me directly. The other thing that you can do is you can well, we're talking with organizations that are on the ground. So we are building a national database. We have to be able to mobilize and move when we get ready to make moves in this country. And we have to be able to do that outside of our small little bubbles. So we need to be able to start thinking on a national collective level. So that's something that's there. You can go there and you can input the information of your organization. If you're an organization, specifically one that provides services or addresses needs within the community, but you can go there and get on that national database as well. And then we also will be giving back to the community. So in each of the cities that we go, we will be leading money on the ground with a local organization to help them move their agenda forward locally, right? Because each community has different things that we need and different initiatives that are going on in each of our communities. But we don't want to just come into a community and tell you what you need to do. We're talking about what we must do as a collective, and then we're coming in and talking about those things that that we have going on that are happening in each individual area as well. So there's a lot that's happening. It's more than us just coming to talk to you, but it is also us coming to talk to you because we have to have that base time with each of our communities, and we want to make sure that we're on the ground. Okay. So that is at the Black Agenda on Tour. I'm typing in a couple of these links right now so that everybody can get to them. Make sure that's still right. Okay, so that's some information. And then also, if you want to reach out to me, I'm putting in my email address as well. And in the comments, I'm sorry, in the description, I'll drop in all of that information. So there'll be all these links inside of the description. But please go ahead and share out this information. Let's remember to remember this man in a way that is outside of the violence and outside of those things. You know, he had really turned his life around from that. And I just want to make sure that we're going in here and that we are beginning to you know, remember the things that he taught us and immediately, right? Because we got a short memory in our community. So that's why I wanted to talk about this from that direction. We got a short memory, and I want us to be able to think about how we begin to put these lessons into action. So thank y'all for joining me today, and I will talk to y'all soon. All right.